What happens when your most unpredictable neighbor, the one you feed, protect, and defend on the global stage, suddenly makes a move behind your back? Not a headline-grabbing explosion, not a missile launch, but something more insidious. A betrayal wrapped in silence. North Korea, China's longtime little brother, just crossed a red line. Not one drawn by the West, but one sketched quietly in the back rooms of Beijing. And now China is silent, dead silent. But behind that silence is extreme anger. For decades, North Korea's survival depended on China for its economy, its food, its fuel, even its protection at the UN Security Council. In return, Pyongyang played the role of loyal rogue, loud, provocative, but never out of Beijing's control. Until now, something has changed. A move has been made, and China didn't approve it. So what did North Korea do to trigger this silent storm? Why is China losing its grip on its most dangerous client? And what does this mean for the fragile balance in Asia and beyond? In this video, let's uncover the betrayal that just shook Beijing. It started with whispers, then satellite images, then confirmation. Over 12,000 North Korean troops had been dispatched to support Russia on the Ukrainian front. Not as observers, not as technicians, as frontline soldiers. On paper, China, Russia, and North Korea all belong to the same ideological orbit, a hardline, anti-Western axis of authoritarian resilience. They attend each other's parades. They veto each other's enemies at the UN. They echo the same language of Western decay and imperialism. But this deployment shattered the illusion of unity. Because China wasn't informed. For a country like China, which prides itself on controlling outcomes, especially in its neighborhood, that's more than a slight. It's a geopolitical insult. North Korea's decision to send troops into Ukraine forces China into an uncomfortable position. Beijing wants to compete with the West through calculated diplomacy, economic domination, and infrastructure diplomacy, not reckless provocations that draw attention, sanctions, and military entanglements. However, North Korea just tossed gasoline on the very fire China has spent years trying to contain with a garden hose labeled strategic patience. And the bigger danger for Beijing isn't just what Pyongyang did, it's what it signals, that the most unpredictable actor in East Asia is no longer asking permission before making global moves. This wasn't a troop deployment. It was a declaration of independence from China. This meant China's vassal state just went rogue. Therefore, to understand the full gravity of this moment, you have to understand the mechanics of the North Korea-China relationship. Pyongyang has never been a true ally. It's been a tool, a strategic pawn China used to keep American influence at bay. The Kim dynasty was tolerated, even protected, because it helped maintain a buffer between Beijing and Seoul, and by extension, Washington. However, China's support wasn't out of love, it was out of leverage. North Korea received fuel, food, and black market trade lifelines through the Chinese border. In return, it agreed, at least loosely, to stay within Beijing's shadow. That meant no nuclear launches without warning, no escalations without coordination, and certainly no forming new military alliances without Beijing's blessing. But Russia's desperation has changed the equation. Faced with grinding losses in Ukraine and needing fresh bodies on the front lines, Moscow turned to North Korea. And Pyongyang, long isolated and desperate for military upgrades, seized the offer. Not only would they send troops, but they would also gain access to Russian missile tech, air defense systems, and perhaps even satellite capabilities. They said yes before China could say anything. That's why Beijing is fuming behind closed doors. Russia didn't just recruit a junior partner, it peeled away China's most controlled puppet. And North Korea's decision to act unilaterally reveals a terrifying truth for Beijing. The vassal has outgrown the leash. This wasn't just about Ukraine. This was about Pyongyang announcing it no longer needs to check in with Beijing before making moves on the global chessboard. And in geopolitics, independence is contagious. Therefore, China was forced to send a silent signal. China is rarely loud in its fury. It doesn't rant, it omits. However, when North Korea sent a congratulatory message to China on its National Day, Beijing responded with its usual formality, except for one thing. The words "friendly neighboring country," a staple phrase in every diplomatic response from China to North Korea for decades, were conspicuously absent. To the average observer, it might seem minor. To diplomats, it's a thunderclap. This was no accident. Beijing was sending a warning, quiet but unmistakable. North Korea had crossed a line. By ignoring Beijing's regional authority, by forming a battlefield pact with Russia, and by dragging China's neighborhood closer to NATO's surveillance, Pyongyang had stepped out of bounds. Inside the walls of Zhongnanhai, the message was clear: control is slipping. And what terrifies Chinese leadership more than chaos is losing the ability to manage it. Pyongyang's rogue behavior now threatens Beijing's entire strategy in Asia. If North Korea can act independently, what's to stop others? If Russia can tempt Beijing's client states away with military toys, what happens to China's grip on its carefully managed periphery? The silence from China isn't passivity. It's shocking, because Beijing thought it was playing chess with the West. Instead, it's now playing dodgeball, with allies who don't follow the rules. What happens next depends on whether Beijing chooses to pull Pyongyang back into line or quietly reshuffles its entire regional strategy before the next ally walks off the board. Before we continue further, tell us, are you enjoying the video? If yes, please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on the latest news stories on geopolitics, economics, and current affairs impacting your lives. Beijing has always believed in power through control, not the chaotic brute force kind that Russia flaunts on the battlefield, or the performative threats that define North Korean diplomacy. China prefers domination through precision, using economic infiltration, infrastructure monopolies, and silent influence campaigns. The Belt and Road Initiative wasn't a parade. It was a blueprint for global leverage. Digital surveillance exports weren't charity. They were test runs for global compliance. Beijing doesn't gamble, it calculates, which is exactly why this troop deployment from North Korea to Ukraine is Beijing's geopolitical nightmare. Not because it's a betrayal in name, but because it shatters the illusion of order. For China, North Korea has always been unruly, yes, but manageable. Like a dangerous pet that bites outsiders but obeys the master's whistle. That illusion just collapsed. Pyongyang didn't wait for signals. It didn't whisper intentions behind closed doors. It leapt straight into the Ukrainian battlefield, dragging China's axis into the global spotlight in the most unwanted way possible. Worse still, this action risks violating every strategic principle China swears by. Beijing has spent 2 years walking a tightrope on the Ukraine war, refusing to condemn Russia, yet refusing to openly arm it. China benefits when the war bleeds NATO, but not when it bleeds into the international courtroom, where sanctions, trade restrictions, and global scrutiny could hit Beijing directly. North Korea just kicked that door open. Now, China's plausible deniability is on fire, and the very balance it maintained of feeding Russia with grain and tech while smiling at European trade partners is under threat. Pyongyang's recklessness is not just destabilizing the West, it's undermining China's most prized illusion, that it is in control. You should know that the growing instability within this so-called axis of resistance isn't the result of bad tactics. It's the result of bad assumptions. Yes, these regimes hate the West. Yes, they want to challenge US hegemony. But beyond that, they are rivals, not brothers. China wants a world ruled through supply chains. Russia wants one ruled through pipelines and tanks. Iran wants a religiously realigned order. North Korea just wants survival, relevance, and weapons. That's not a coalition. That's a war room with knives under the table. Beijing assumed that authoritarianism was enough of a glue to hold it all together. That shared opposition to liberal democracy meant shared goals, shared rules, and shared timing. It was wrong. What North Korea's move exposed is that dictators don't take orders. They take opportunities. When Russia's war machine started sputtering, it didn't turn to China for help. It turned to the desperate regime next door. And Pyongyang didn't consult Beijing before saying yes, because it didn't have to. It saw an opportunity for influence, for weapons, for leverage. This wasn't a betrayal rooted in loyalty. It was a reminder that authoritarian alliances are only as strong as the favors exchanged, and the moment one player finds a better deal, the alliance fractures. Chaotic impulsive behavior is baked into the system when leaders don't answer to the people, only to their own survival. And now, that very chaos is bleeding out into every region China once thought it could control. Now Beijing may still supply North Korea's fuel. It may still control cross-border trade. It may still block sanctions at the UN. But let's not confuse control over logistics with control over choices. North Korea has shown that it's not waiting for permission anymore. It has traded the discipline of subservience for the volatility of war barter diplomacy. And now it's on a battlefield where China never wanted it to be. For Beijing, the danger isn't just in the headlines. It's in what comes next. If North Korean troops die in large numbers in Ukraine, global cameras will turn not just to Pyongyang, but to its enablers. Western diplomats will ask, who's feeding this machine? Who's keeping the lights on in the most sanctioned regime on Earth? And all fingers will point to China. The silence Beijing has maintained until now won't hold forever. If the conflict escalates, China faces an impossible decision: double down on defending a rogue partner and risk becoming an official enemy of the West, or cut Pyongyang loose and admit that even the most tightly controlled dictatorships can slip the leash. Either path costs China the one thing it values above all else: strategic ambiguity. Because when the puppet starts acting without strings and the world notices, it's no longer the puppet that's questioned. It's the puppeteer. And in that moment, China doesn't just lose control of North Korea. It loses the illusion that it was ever truly in control to begin with. What do you think? Is the so-called axis of resistance even real? Or just a bunch of paranoid regimes pretending to cooperate? Why is China so quiet right now? Is it planning something? Or is it truly losing control? In the comment section below, share your thoughts on whether Beijing should abandon North Korea before it gets dragged deeper into war, or would that be the biggest mistake yet? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If yes, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We bring the latest news stories on geopolitics, economics, changing world order, and current affairs. Things you need to stay informed. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.